In this video, we'll show you how to create a new article in Joomla 1.5. If you're using a later version of Joomla, like Joomla 1.6, you may see a few things differently in your screen. So we've logged into Joomla, and to create a new article, you can actually do it in a few different ways, but the easiest way to do it is to go ahead and click the Add New Article icon that you see in the main control panel. A new screen opens up, and you can type the name of your article in the title field. And you definitely want to go ahead and include an alias for your article, using all lowercase and hyphens in between words. And you'll mainly want to do this when you are using search engine friendly URLs, which we recommend to everybody. We'll do a separate video on how to create search engine friendly URLs in Joomla. In Joomla 1.5, you'll need to go ahead and select a section and a category in which you want your article to appear. You won't necessarily see those broken out separately in later versions of Joomla. You'll want to select Yes for Published, and most of the time you'll want to select No for Front Page. There may be some instances where you want an article to appear on the front page of your site, but most of the time you don't. Underneath that, you'll see a Wysiwyg Editor with a whole bunch of icons and controls that look very similar to what you'd see in Microsoft Word or a word processing program. And you'll see a box underneath that where you can type in your text. Now keep in mind that we're using the JCE, which is a more robust editor than what you get out of the box with Joomla, and we highly recommend that you install the JCE extension. It's just a much more powerful editor than what you normally get. So you can do things, obviously you can do basic things like bolding, you can insert images, you can insert links. If you wanted to link to another page, you'd be able to do that here. And you can also remove links. And we won't get into all of those details here, but it's very, very similar to what you'd see in Word. The next thing that we want to look at is here in the right column. You'll see a section called Parameters Article. And this is where you can enter basic information about your article, like who the author is, if you're using an author alias, so you don't want someone's name displayed on the front end, you can use an alias. If the article is accessible to everybody, meaning it's publicly accessible, or if you only want this article to be accessible to people who have logged in with a username and password, in other words, registered users. And there are also special permissions that you can apply to articles, but we'll get into all of those access levels and permissions in a different video as well. Most of the time you want to leave the created date and the start publishing date as the defaults, which are usually today's date. And you don't normally ever want to finish publishing, but if you do want to change any of these things, you would just go ahead and click in that field and you can select a new date from these, the little pop-up window that appears there. We won't get into advanced parameters in this video. We will explain that in a separate video, but we do want to point out that there's a third area here called Metadata Information, where you can enter meta descriptions and meta keywords for your articles. And you can also enter special instructions and settings for robots. So we highly recommend that you always include a meta description for every single article on your site, and that you always include keywords for every single article on your site. The description should be very keyword rich, so these things are pretty closely linked. You want to spend a lot of time thinking up front about all the articles in your site and what words users would use to search for that type of content, and then make sure you're repeating those words here in the description, in the meta keywords, and also obviously in the body of your article. When you're all done, you can go ahead and hit save. And we do recommend that if you're working on a really long article, you actually hit apply every once in a while to save what you've done so far. You don't want to spend 2 hours on an article and then discover that you've lost your internet connection and you've lost all of your work. So if you're working in there for a little while, go ahead and hit apply every once in a while. You can also hit preview while you're working on the article to see an example of how that page will look on the front end. Right now it's just displaying the heading and the text, and that's really all we're seeing there. You can also hit help up here in the upper right if you want to go ahead and view help information about this page, or about one of the functions on this page. And one other thing that we wanted to point out is that if you are, let's say you create all of your content in a Word file, or you're grabbing content from an old HTML document or something like that, if you're pasting content into Joomla or really any content management system, you need to be very careful about getting content from those sources, because Microsoft Word and some old HTML tools will insert their own code, their own tags into content. So if you're doing that, just always go ahead and go up here and hit this little icon here and hit paste as plain text. And a window will pop up where you can actually just, go ahead and paste in all of your content from your other file, and then just hit insert. And that'll just strip out all of those unnecessary tags and coding, and that'll be much better for your site and for your users. Otherwise, you'll get a lot of extra tags and coding in there, and you never know how it might end up displaying on the front end. So that's it. You go ahead and hit save, and you've just created your very first Joomla article.